The Comedy Cellar live from the table is brought to you by Sheath Underwear. If you want to support the show and get 20% off your order, head over to sheathunderwear.com/cellar. Code CELLAR for 20% off your first order. That's sheathunderwear.com/cellar. Code CELLAR. This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world-famous Comedy Cellar on Sirius XM 99, Raw Comedy. By the way, Sirius, they're not... I sent in that album I made with Lenny here at the Village, or rather at the Fat Black Pussycat, and they said they did not accept any of the tracks for payment, for playing. So I'm mad at Sirius. Anyway, this is Dan Naturman.
Keep it up. Maybe you can just get them to cancel this show too. Go ahead.
Well, is this show on Sirius?
Yes. That's why you were saying it, yes.
No, I thought that the comedy shows are on. Anyway, we have with us, the comedy episodes. I thought those go to Sirius, and this just go to...
Oh, well, let's see how this one turns out. Go ahead.
Anyway, this is Dan Naturman. They used to play me on Sirius. They no longer do. I'm with Noam Dworman, owner of the Comedy Cellar with Periel Aschenbrand, and joining us via the miracle of teleconferencing, Aurelia Song, who's the winner of the Brain Preservation Prize, and has spent the last several years working to adapt the technology for human use. She thinks that we'll be able to download memories to computer, I believe is what you...
We'll be able to preserve them.
Yes.
Now, it's Aurelia, right? Not Aurelia.
Aurelia.
Aurelia, because it's one E, not two. But anyway, so let me just say that, am I allowed to say about where we met?
Yeah, why not?
It's not what you think. We met at a conference called Dialogue in Arizona, where various people of various walks of life, a lot of finance people, but it's like, right? It's like seems like 50% finance people and 50% other interesting people. And Aurelia was one of the very first people I met when we were being segregated on the first evening by some sort of, what was it, like Greek myth characters or something. I forget how we were. And I took a liking to her right away, and she has a fascinating company, a startup, I guess you'd call it, which is essentially she's gonna tell us, but like, you'll never die. When you're getting close to the end, they're gonna freeze you or whatever it is, and then you'll wake up and you'll be all young and vital, and your sex organs will work again, and everything will be fine. But and then Dan is always focused on dying. I said, well, I met somebody in Arizona who actually has a company like that. So let's get her on the show. So welcome, Aurelia. It's nice to see you again.
Great to see you again.
So you want to give us an overview? Actually, Dan, you're so interested.
Well, so tell us about, do you freeze the individual right prior to death? Because once you're dead, I'm pretty sure, that would be a lot harder to reverse that.
And by the way, I'm going to do this. But go ahead.
Okay, well, you might as well, Okay.
So I spent I won the Brain Preservation Prize in 2016, and I've spent the intervening time figuring out how to get this to work for people. And it's a process that has to be done immediately after death, and it's something where the death has to be controlled. I've run a human brain bank, and I've tested a lot of variants of this, both on animals and in human cases that were human donation cases. And it looks very strongly like it, first of all, can be done and can be done successfully, and successfully preserve memories. But it's got to be under very tight constraints. So that's kind of the result of the last several years of research that I've done, such that now I have something that I think will actually work.
Wait. Let's take it step by step, because I remember. First of all, you're in the state of Oregon, correct?
That's correct.
And tell us the reason why. It has to be Oregon. Tell them why.
So you have to do this as part of an end-of-life procedure. So this is for people who are terminally ill, which means that a doctor thinks that you are likely to die within 6 months. So if you're terminally ill and you want to be preserved, then you go through the same process that everybody else who does death with dignity or medical aid in dying does. You get drugs that will end your life in a controlled manner, and then you do that as normal. And then immediately after that, we preserve you.
Well, hold on. First of all, you mentioned you're from Oregon. Is argon used in this process?
Oregon.
No, but
the state of
I'm just
Oregon.
making a play on words. I was just wondering if argon has any. Isn't argon like something you might use to freeze somebody?
It's actually really interesting. Some people studied xenon and whether it could adjust ice crystals, and it apparently does. It was kind of really interesting, I think, in the 80s and 90s, and I don't think anything came out of it, but there was actually some excitement using noble gases to interfere with ice crystal formation.
So I was right. Noble gases, there is a possibility.
Right. So let me just, because she didn't answer it. So it's probably because you've answered so many times. You don't realize. So the reason I understand it had to be in Oregon, because most states will not permit the doctor to put you to sleep. Oregon is one of the only states, or maybe the only state, where they can actually oversee the process. The doctor will kill you, and exactly as you're dying, simultaneously, Nectome is the name of the company?
Nectome.
Nectome.
Nectome. Nectome.
Well, that's what I said. N-E-T-C. Yes. Nectome. They will be there and transition you to your frozen state. Now, let's really get into the detail here. I come in, you know the movie Total Recall. You go in the chair, like what does it really look like? I show up. What's the office look like? What's the procedure? What's the paraphernalia, the machinery?
So, I've talked to a lot of people, and I've asked them, how do they want to die? Nobody wants to die, but if you do have to die, how do you want to die? And I have gotten the same answer basically from every single person I've ever talked to about it, which is that they don't want a bunch of machines around them. They want to have their family around them. They want it to be in a dignified way. If you got to die, dying in your living room with your family around you is about the best you can get. And so it's very similar to that. You have your family around you, ideally. You have your prescription medication that your doctor has prescribed you, and then you take that medication. So it's in contrast to like euthanasia, where there's an injection by a doctor that ends your life. This is what they call medical aid in dying. So you consume medication, and then that ends your life.
So, and you're agnostic about what medication the doctor uses. That doesn't matter to your process.
That's correct.
And then how is the freezing done? Okay, I'm in my living room now.
How long does it take once you take the pill for you to then die, and then how quickly do they freeze you?
So given that you probably would have traveled to Oregon to do this, it wouldn't be your living room. It'd be a room that's prepared, but something that's appropriate for to have your family around.
Vermont Inn.
So when you take this medication, generally you go to sleep within a minute or two, and then you're dead after a few minutes after that. And so once you're unconscious, we move you to an adjoining room, and then in that place you're preserved.
But how? How are you preserved?
So the way this works is it is a process that is somewhat similar to embalming, where you gain access to the aortic arch by doing a type of surgery. And then you're able to pump chemicals through the blood vessels. So those chemicals go to every single cell in the body, most importantly, all the cells in the brain. And those preservation chemicals then essentially glue the proteins inside those cells together into a gel. And once they're converted into that form, the machinery of life basically stops moving and is preserved. And then there's a secondary process after that initial gelation step where we displace a lot of the water with cryoprotectants. And again, you're delivering these cryoprotectants through the vascular system. So what it looks like is very similar to like a heart bypass surgery, where there's tubes that are going in, they're pumping chemicals through, and it's preserving all these cells. And then finally, this entire body is stored in cold storage, and it can be stored that way for 100 years and not degrade.
So I know you got something.
Go ahead, hit it.
I'm just picturing because obviously time is of the essence. They're like, everybody's like, it's like almost like it's all phony. Like everybody's like, oh, go to see Mr. Dworman, it's so nice. And then okay, he's dead. Dum 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 dum, and the stopwatch is going. Everything like, get him out of here. How many seconds do you have to get these chemicals into the person's body so that the natural decay of the brain, which happens pretty quickly, right, happens immediately?
So this is the thing that's taken me years to figure out what the limits really are. And the name of the game, more or less, is speed, as you say. Once a person dies, you have about 12 minutes to start perfusing chemicals. But that's once they die. So they're moved to the room, their life ends there, and then that timer starts. We can fairly reliably do this in about 4 minutes in our animal models.
So you've frozen animals and then brought them back? And you remember how to sit?
What I do is, there's an important distinction here. What I do is preservation. So the only thing that's possible to do today is preservation, and you can't bring anything back because it's way too complicated to do. And this is pretty similar to basically everything that's happened before. It's almost always easier to archive something than it is to do anything with it. So, for example, if you're a librarian, right, and you have a book that's written in a script that you can't read, it might be the work of multiple generations to eventually decipher that book and have it become part of human knowledge. But if you just want to preserve the book, that's a matter of understanding ink, and it's an understanding of paper chemistry, and it is in some cases an understanding of how to transcribe that into a new book so that the information isn't lost. So you can be a caretaker of the information, and that's often a lot easier than actually reading information or changing it or doing anything with it. Does that make sense?
I have a thousand more, but you go.
Well, the technology that would need to exist to bring someone back from the dead in this way, assuming it's possible, how long do you reckon it's going to take for us to crack that puzzle?
So I've often modeled that as being the work of 1 or 2 generations of neuroscientists to do. Nowadays, it's really complex to actually predict that out. If you'd asked me this 5 or 6 years ago, I would have said, somewhere between 50 and 80 years. And the one thing that could change that is AI. And because there's been a lot of rapid progress in AI, it is in general hard to predict almost any technology or any technological advancement on any sensible time frame anymore. Because if you imagine that developing a certain technology of any kind takes so many man years of development, right? And then you have AI that's able to do that in accelerated time, or over, say, a week, you suddenly have 100 years of engineering put to a project, then you can get some wacky things happening. So I would no longer be surprised if the technology to get people back came as early as 30 years at this point.
Well, that's assuming people are working assiduously on this. Who's working on this?
So I would say that the whole neuroscience community, in their quest to understand the brain, is constantly developing new technologies to model neurons and to scan neurons in very high throughput. I think that we'll probably have the whole mouse connectome within 10 years or less at this point. And that's kind of the first step towards being able to scan preserved people and get them back.
But there's a catch. It's not just about being brought back. You want to be brought back and then have all the advancements such that you can then live another 1,000 years or whatever it is. I don't want to be brought back as an old man and then die a week later.
1,000 years.
I want to live forever.
Oh,
forever.
God.
Forever and ever. Amen. So when do you think? Well, you could have no idea, but that is the plan, right? You want to get brought back at a time when they can roll back your age, when there's all sorts of
where they can at least cure what killed you.
All kinds of perks. Yeah, but I don't want to. Even if I'm 80 and I have terminal cancer, what, they're going to cure the cancer? Then I die at 85 of
hilarious. Imagine you come back and then you die a week later.
Yeah. So
I assume it would be preserved again, right? And if you were in a situation
right. Is there like a punch card where, like, after 9 preservations you get a free one? Like a loyalty card.
So okay, to take a little bit of a step back here, I don't think it would make much sense to bring someone back if you didn't also have the capabilities to allow them to flourish, right?
Yeah.
And so in the case of somebody who is 85, that would include being able to live without, being very likely to die within 2 years. So you simply wouldn't bring someone back if for some reason you had the ability to do that, but didn't have the ability to heal them in further ways. That being said, I do think that if you can get someone back from a preserved state, that technology is probably much harder to develop than technology to allow them to live as long as they potentially want to. And so I think that it's not actually going to practically be an issue.
I'll tell you, but we still won't have an umbrella that doesn't get turned inside out in the wind.
Dan, move over a little bit to your right so okay, no, not that far. Put Dan back on the screen so he can see himself. I want to put Dan in the middle of no, that's too far.
Sorry.
But yeah, so okay, but now here, Aurelia. Now listen. You've seen the movie Pet Sematary, right?
I haven't actually. How does it go?
Well, you probably shouldn't. Because I would imagine this movie's scary for regular people, but this movie would scare the shit out of you because in that movie, they bring them back to life and they think they're okay. And then little by little, we realize they're not okay. They're slightly different. They have problems. Will this involve testing on animals first, bringing them back, monkeys? Do you have a bunch of monkeys already frozen, ready to test them first when?
So there's this trend in Hollywood that like irritates the hell out of me. Whenever they try to depict preservation, right? The story is always, oh, there's this one maverick person and they invent some sort of uploading technology or they invent some preservation technology and they get it to be used on them successfully and it works. And then nobody else ever does it. And there's no further development of the technology for like hundreds of years. And then nevertheless, even though there's not thousands of people preserved or millions of people preserved so that it would be all that useful to develop technology to bring someone back, nevertheless, that society brings them back. And then, it's a great story because now they're a refugee. They've been displaced from their original time and they've got to maybe teach the future people some useful lesson while learning some stuff themselves. But it's kind of a silly way that this would ever actually happen. In the case where you're actually bringing people back, then you would expect there to be a trend of increasing numbers of preservations that happen every year because it becomes increasingly easy to imagine that you can come back from it. There's going to be increasing demonstrations of partial revival in animals and in neuroscience that make it easier and easier to imagine. So, there's a big difference between right now, right, where it's not exactly clear what the form of technology to get people back would look like, even though it's clear that we can do the preservations, and say 30 years from now, where you actually have brought someone back and they're talking with people, but perhaps the process that brought them back was very expensive. It cost $1 billion. It took 10 years, like the first human genome to be scanned did. And yet it's very clear that that process is going to become cheap and potentially eventually free. I think in that scenario, you'd have a very large percentage of people that want to be preserved. Those people then therefore form a political class, an interest group, just like people suffering with any type of disease that are going to be able to demand fair treatment. So, when somebody is preserved today, the next thing they're going to see is whether it worked or not. There's no experience of the intervening time. So I think it matters a lot to think about what that's going to be like. And it's tricky for someone to even consent to being revived today because they don't know exactly what that's going to look like. And nevertheless, it's something that's going to happen to them immediately. So how do you deal with that? The way I deal with that is this idea of a sort of proxy consent. And it's the same thing that I do in my life all the time when I fly planes or, if you're considering other hypothetical situations. So for example, let's say you have the opportunity to go to Mars, right? Do you want to get a ticket to go to Mars? Well, it's kind of cool. You might want to do that. But if somebody offered me a ticket to go to Mars, I would be scared to accept it because I don't know if it's safe, right? And I'm also not a rocket scientist, so I don't really have the tools to evaluate whether it's going to be safe or not. But what I can do is I can say, well, how'd the last 10,000 people that went to Mars do? Did they make it there and were they happy? And if that is the case, then I can say, okay, I'll get that ticket too. So same thing for preservation. The people who are being preserved now are not going to be the first people to be revived. People who are going to be revived are the people who can properly give informed consent to whatever the technology of the future is. And then we'll see how it works for them. And in the case where it has worked well for people, then you take the people who trusted in this sort of proxy consent for the future and get them back.
Well,
it's a more boring story, but I think it's more accurate.
You said it's a Hollywood trend. I haven't seen it. I thought I was about to pitch it to Netflix. It seemed like an interesting.
Well, like Futurama, right? They have functional cryopreservation, and there's very, very few people that ever make use of it. I think that if you had a technology like that actually functioned, it would be used a lot more. There's another example in Star Trek where they discover a bunch of cryonics patients from the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
But there's only like 5 of them, and it works. They actually bring them back to life. And it's very strange because they clearly have a method that would allow people to be preserved and come back in the future. And everyone, including the cryonics patients and the space people in the future, are like, we don't really care about it. It's like, no, this is a revolutionary technology. Like this changes a lot how society works at this point.
They stored them in cubes at one time. Don't destroy.
Well, this is not to be confused with suspended animation, which is very commonly seen in movies. But that's different. That's taking a living person and basically putting them on pause, and then waking them up at some future date. But it's not. But the person's never dead. The person's alive, and their whole biological processes are put on pause,
or very much slowed down, unless we saw that in Planet of the Apes. So it costs. This is the amazing part. Well, two things. First of all, when we were in Arizona, we all take this oath that we can't say what anybody said to us or who said it, and there's so much I want to say about the stuff I heard there. But I'll
Why? What is it, like AA for like crazy ideas?
That's not crazy idea. It's just like it's a place where people can go and they can say and discuss whatever they want without openly, without having to worry about somebody turning them in. You can think out loud. You can say outrageous things, or it's a nice thing. So, but
turning them in,
whatever. So one guy there said, like, let's say women wives should make breakfast in the morning for their husbands. So one guy there, very important guy, very smart, said he's against this because he felt that if he got woken up 1,000 years from now, that we, the 1,000-year woken up community, would be discriminated against, that we would be used as slaves. and like just like treated as second-class citizens, as grunts. And it's funny when somebody is that successful. Like if Periel said that,
they want to end on a high note. I guess.
If Periel said that, they're like, what are you, fucking idiot? This guy has such a resume. I'm like, oh my God, like I got to take it seriously. But do you think, like, I feel like the arc, as they say, of morality always bends to the better. I don't believe that 1,000 years from now we're going to be in some dystopian hell, waking people up after 1,000.
You might be.
But you might find yourself dumber than everybody, perhaps in a world where we've mastered genetic manipulation.
I think as long as they don't know I'm Jewish 1,000 years from now, I'll be fine. What, do you have any feeling about that? And then I have the other question. Go ahead, Aurelia. Go ahead.
It sounds corny as hell, but I really think the future loves us. I think the future wants us, and yes. I think that because, like, if you're looking at all these generations spread out into the future, right? And you're wondering, like, do we want to be the types of generations that reach our hands back and help each other, or do we want to be the ones that foreclose the opportunity of these future generations to welcome us back? The only thing that's really stable is one, and one that's treating the future with respect, is to give that future the option. So, like, preserving yourself is not about forcing yourself on the future and then they resent you and discriminate against you, right? Because the future is what has the power here, and the future is what has the ability to welcome you back or not. So to preserve yourself is simply to safeguard the option of the future to welcome you back with love. Well, and to not be preserved is to deny them that option. So that's really how this game works. If you're coming back, it's because they want you.
This is what's interesting, and then I'll leave it to you, Dan and Periel. So the price for this is $10,000. Now, I'd suggested to Aurelia it'd be $9,999.99. I thought it was from Mark, but she says no, $10,000 is. But all joking aside, $10,000 seems very inexpensive for such a profound thing. And by the way, when you wake up, you're no longer married.
Yeah, I paid nearly a thousand.
I do want to correct this because there's there were people who put down $10,000 as a kind of deposit towards this.
Yeah.
Before we determined the price. So that was a thing that we did like in the past that just was to gauge interest. But the actual price that I'd be charging this would be $60,000.
You told me. Well, I don't care. I'll be dead. What do I care? I can't take the money with me anyway. You could charge me $100,000. I don't care. But I thought it was $10,000. I think you raised the price. But yeah, I think that
and this would be payable, I assume, not by credit card.
Yeah, by credit, it's not by check.
Well, I don't know. Like,
not.
You can't do an installment.
Not by promissory note. So
wait, is it 60 for the whole thing, like also to get woken back up, or it's just 60 to
no, you're going to owe them whatever cost to be woken up, you're going to owe them when you wake up. Right?
I think that would be like kind of monstrous to do. And again, I think the process of getting woken up would be part of a healthcare system that doesn't exist in a vacuum. But
I mean, because that seems like a nightmare. You wake up and the first thing you get is this big bill.
That does not seem like a nightmare. Yeah, if I wake up 1,000 years from now in a beautiful life in utopia, I don't care about the bill. I'll work it off.
Nobody said anything about utopia.
Well, then you can kill yourself.
Sheath Underwear is where it's at. They're the official underwear of comedy. All of the big comedians are wearing them. Their underwear has a 2-pouch design. One's for your dick and the other's for your balls. They'll keep your dick from sticking to your leg and your balls from sticking to your dick. It's a miracle.
Let's see. We're going to open up here
Sheath Underwear.
a pair of, first of all,
Do I have a pair for
the first
me?
thing you notice,
those are for
the first thing you notice, Phil, is very, very, very soft.
No, that's the elastane
and
fabric blend.
fabric blend.
Now wait, can I
says
just see it?
92% bamboo, 8% elastane. What bamboo? That's
No added sugar.
So
there's a famous Calypso song called "The Big Bamboo," which is like a song about a big penis.
And Noam, look at how it supports
wait,
your
so you guys are supposed to wait a second. You guys are
This is the white guy model.
and then you stick your
Sarai,
penis
Sarai.
through this, or you put your balls through here. You literally.
Periel, this is where your balls go.
How do they
And
get
your-
in
and
there?
your pee-pee,
Oh,
pee-pee goes through here, and then you take it out to go pee.
like a little head.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, this is.
They look really
I mean,
comfy.
doesn't that feel comfortable? Doesn't that look
Well,
comfortable
it
just
is.
by looking at it?
So go to sheathunderwear.com/seller or use code SELLER at checkout to get 20% off your first order. Each order includes Sheath's 100% money-back guarantee. Again, for 20% off your first order, sheathunderwear.com/seller or promo code SELLER at checkout. Get Sheath Underwear. Support the show. Support your balls.
I don't understand. I'm making all these jokes. I don't understand the pessimism about something so fantastic. It's the most basic human urges to want to be alive. Here you are promising that you can wake up, see the future, be alive, be healthy, and you're worried about the fucking money. It's true what they say about you people.
I would like to remind you that you waltzed in here this evening and said, "Oh, I am."
Because I think my life's almost over. You think I'd feel this way if I knew that I was just getting started? The things that I would do, the different decisions I would make?
What? Give me one thing.
Everything. I would open new businesses.
You are opening a new business.
I would go back to school. There's so much.
What would you go back to school for?
It doesn't matter. The point is that when your time horizon zooms out, it's a totally different.
Why can't you go back to school?
I can go back. Let's say I want to study physics.
Do you?
Yeah, maybe I would.
Well, why don't you study physics then?
Because I only have a little bit of time left.
Well, that's absurd. You have plenty of time left. You have no idea how much time you have left.
Is there an IQ test to take?
Well, seems like we're straying a bit off topic.
Anyway, so I think that the more you charge, the more people will do it. It's just like a show at the Comedy Cellar. If the cover charge is too low, people think it's not reliable. You're talking about something people want to. I think you should charge $500,000. Like, it should really be expensive. You can make side deals, but it should be very, very expensive. You have rich people doing this, but I want to do this. And can I already sign up?
Oh my God.
I'm not kidding.
So you have to be terminally ill. Yeah, I guess
with
if
that.
here's part of the problem. Okay.
Wait, this is not fair. Now, this is important now. I hadn't thought of this. I can't do this unless I get terminally ill. I can't just do it. I can't when I get old. Like most people don't die of a terminal illness. Most people die of a heart attack or suddenly, or like they expire. I want to be able to know that I can do this. I have to fake cancer or something.
So a huge fraction. So the primary way people die is heart disease, and the second primary way is cancer. And almost every type of cancer would qualify as terminally ill. And a decent fraction of heart disease is not in a vacuum, right? There's often enough wrong with someone that if they are trying to plan the end of their life, that can make sense. But it is true currently that the laws of the country are such that it has to be a terminal illness.
There's got to be a doctor who will take some money out of the
Well, there could be another country you could do it.
No, only Oregon.
No, you can do it.
There's some other countries the laws are subtle and complex, and I think they're from a time when there was less respect for individual autonomy, and they haven't changed as much. There's different variants, like you can't end your life at all for any reason is still, I would say, the majority on the planet for where it is, and I would say that is fundamentally in contradiction to like the basic principles of personal autonomy, and that's a tension that we're going to have to resolve, and we are resolving it, but we're doing it very slowly, I think.
I'm interested in.
I'm upset now. Go ahead.
In how you plan to keep these people on ice indefinitely. Say it does take 1,000 years. I'm skeptical that it will ever happen, but okay. Say it takes 1,000 years. Who's in charge of this of keeping these bodies going for 1,000 years?
You thought he was going to get a sitcom, but he's skeptical that
your company might not be around in 1,000 years. You might change business.
I think 1,000 years is almost impossible to do because there's so much changes in society that it is extremely hard to create any type of legal or financial instrument that can actually survive. While we do have things that have lasted thousands of years, like libraries and such, I think it's mostly an accident. I think it's selection bias. Like you point to something and say, well, this thing survived 2,000 years, so can't you do it that way? I think that's not true, because what you're not seeing is the other things that were set up in a similar way that didn't. So 1,000 years, realistically, I don't think it will work. If you want to do 100 years, I would say that is relatively straightforward, because there's lots of cemeteries that have been around for more than 100 years if they're set up correctly. A startup is not the correct organization to last 100 years with any degree of certainty. And so we specifically designed it so that if Nectome goes bankrupt or doesn't exist for some reason, that the people who've already been preserved are going to be okay.
This is
so you feel that about 100 years is about as long as is possible for this to work, or would you go a little bit further than 100?
It's very hard to predict anything anymore because, again, I can't see anywhere into the future more than about like 7 to 10 years anymore, due to AI kind of changing the game here a lot. But if it was at all reminiscent of the past, yeah, you can definitely set up things that go 100. I think 150 is reasonable, and then you start to have increasingly difficult ability to keep things around.
So, Noam, what are the odds that in 150 years you'll be able to bring people back from the dead?
Well, I'm Team Nectome. I think you can do it. Listen, there's got to be a doctor
I'm sure we could
Who
find
could take some money on the side to say you had cancer? There's like, I just have to believe there's a way around this.
Wait, so you take the bodies?
Well, but do you think realistically that within 100, 150 years is the time frame she's talking about, that there's any chance that this could work?
Yes,
Yes, obviously he does.
I do believe it. I mean, I think that technology accelerates. In
certain areas, it accelerates.
And then, as she says, AI is, although AI, the more familiar I get with it, it's not quite what we think it is yet. It's really like a huge, powerful autofill in some way. But it definitely, and it makes a lot of mistakes. But obviously, it's going to get way, way better. If you just imagine like the early videos or movies of people trying to fly, it was very quickly before we had F-16. So I'm sure the technology will move along fast. And once they crack the code, as it were, of aging and stuff,
dude, they can't get rid of my psoriasis. And I mean, not all technology moves like computers.
Listen, first of all, you have nothing to lose here.
No, you don't.
And it's not a lot of money, and it's 50% down and 50% when you wake up. How does it work?
it's all of it down when you get preserved. But yeah,
is $60,000 enough to keep somebody on ice for potentially 100 years?
It is. It is, even without taking into account potential decreases in the cost of energy over time, which I think are realistic to project, but I don't include that.
Now, you also have to preserve the body along with it.
This is a whole body preservation technique. So the whole body is preserved. It's just the brain is one of the trickiest things to preserve. And generally, if you can preserve the brain really well, that means you can preserve the rest of the body really well too.
And I mentioned before, one of the first things I asked her when I met her was, well, okay, when you wake me up, let's say my wife and I do this together, will we still be married? Mm-hmm. And this
reminds me of Jesus, where the Pharisees.
Well, that's not for her to decide.
This lady married 7 people in a row,
That's for the legal people to decide.
No, death do us part. We are legally dead.
Okay, that's an interesting point.
I mean, of course we could get divorced, but like, what if she wants to take half? Whatever. I mean,
now the problem here is if you come back, were you ever really dead?
Details is what I'm saying. Go ahead.
If you can come back, were you ever really dead?
Yes.
Well, you said at the beginning of this episode that shortly after death is when you begin the process. Unless we want to redefine what dead is, of course.
I'm an originalist.
Well, I think we're going to have to redefine what dead is because right now it's cardiac death. A doctor listens to your heart and it's stopped. And if that condition kept on going, you're going to decay, right? And you're not going to be conscious ever again. But like the reason that cardiac death is a legitimate type of death is because it's highly predictive of you ever being conscious again. And this is starting to break that. So I do think that like if you can get people back from this, I think it'll eventually be seen not as dying, but as a chemically induced coma.
Wow.
Okay.
And because it doesn't make that much sense.
One more question.
And then I got a question.
How old are you when you wake up? So if you die at 85, do you wake up at 85 or you go back and you're vital? Because you started talking about
this. That's the dumbest question I've ever heard.
That's the dumbest question you've ever heard?
They're preserving you at the moment of death. So if they preserve that, then you'll be that when you wake up.
And then hopefully when you wake up, they'll have therapies to roll you back.
How is that the dumbest question?
First of all, because we already covered it.
No.
Second of all, I said I don't want to wake up at 85 and then be 85 and then just die at 85.
But Aurelia didn't. I want to hear what she says.
Okay, go ahead, Aurelia.
So I think if you come back, again, you got to enable flourishing, but part of that is not being in a really unfamiliar body. So right now, I would be in favor of bringing someone back almost exactly as they were when they were preserved, and then having them have the ability to change their body and change their, other parts about themselves at a rate that's comfortable to them, right? And I could be convinced otherwise. I think we'll have a developed clinical theory of this over the next decades, which I don't personally have to worry about that much. I just do the preservations. So if somebody shows that hey, actually you can jump straight to this form of a younger version of yourself and it doesn't cause problems, right? Then great. Okay. I suspect that if you make too many changes all at once, it might cause some type of dysphoria, though, because it's too much of a change. But I don't know. This is something that should be researched and will be researched.
Are there any other companies in this business, or are you the only game in town?
So preservation's, depending on how broad you want to think about it, it's a very ancient type of thing, right? I mean, the purpose of what the original Egyptians were doing was to preserve you, so it would kind of anchor your soul into the world. They thought that the soul had 5 different parts, and one of them was your physical body. And so by protecting your soul, they weren't expecting you to wake up, but by protecting your body, it kind of secured your afterlife. I would say that given that they didn't know enough about biology to make their preservation work, that probably shouldn't count. But the idea behind it, I think, is fairly similar. Like, the impulse to do this has been around. If you go to Benjamin Franklin, he literally wrote saying, "I wish somebody could figure out how to like make some sort of cask of like alcohol or something that you could put someone in, and just it would kind of suspend them, and then they could wake up again." He was thinking, well, I would love to wake up and see how America's doing, 200, 300 years from now. And so, practically, I'd say it's been with us for centuries, this idea.
A republic, if you can keep it.
But currently, in doing precisely what you're doing now, with the promise of, if not eternal life, then being brought back from the dead, who's doing this besides your company?
So I would say, like, starting in the 60s, there was a guy named Robert Ettinger who published this thing called The Prospect of Immortality. And that kind of started the more modern movement here to try and be rigorous about it. And there's been several companies, Alcor, Cryonics Institute, et cetera, that have engaged in preserving people, more based on cryobiology, and using variations between like freezing them and trying to perfuse some cryoprotectants in. The key difference here would be the brain preservation prize. So, like, from my point of view, we know what it takes to preserve memories, to preserve the essence of a person, and it's a standard we can measure, and it's a standard that we can meet. And so, what I did was I looked at the current protocols that exist and saw that they don't meet that standard. That doesn't mean that they don't work, but it does mean that you can't say that neuroscience says it does work, right? And I want to meet that higher standard.
I forget what I was going to say. Anyway, we have pretty demanding listeners here, so I do have to ask you what I know everybody's going to be asking me, which is, you don't have anybody frozen yet. You don't have any animals frozen yet. Is there any? Is this anything but an idea as of now? Is the technology established? Like, what is this? How is this moved beyond an idea at this point?
So we've done a lot of testing on donated human brains. So these are people that when they die, they want to donate their brain to science, but they're not clients. It's not that they're being preserved for the long term. We've done very extensive testing on animals. So we can preserve an animal using the protocols that we defined, and then we can look at its brain after it's preserved and show that the brain is preserved well enough that the memories are still there according to current neuroscience theory of memory.
Oh, I remember what it was. So one of the people also at our conference was bothered by your company because they had a religious objection to it, that somehow this was in conflict with the notion of a soul and blah blah blah. Have you had people just bring that up to you? And like, obviously you can't do this and believe in the soul.
I think you can, actually.
I guess you can believe anything.
I like. To me, it seems...
as a scientist, that's not what I want to hear from you, because I'm trusting my future to you. So I want to hear you don't believe in the soul, but go ahead.
Okay, so like people sometimes talk about this with regards to like teleporters, right? If you walk into a teleporter that like disintegrates you and it beams the information somewhere over and then it rebuilds you in that other new location, then what happens to your soul, right? And I do think it'd be taking as given that souls exist, I think it'd be awfully silly if you could walk through a teleporter and have that like disconnect you from your soul in some way, like trick God into not recognizing you as the same person somehow. That seems absurd to me. That doesn't make much sense. Like you go through a teleporter and you pop out in a new place. Are you like, are you a new person? Like, you know, that seems weird, right? I don't see how that would really make that much sense from most current like religious understandings of how the soul is supposed to work. The only thing that makes sense to me is that it would obviously be the same person and attach even through that type of disruption, because the causality is still there. Meaning, what the person who, before they walk through the transporter, you know, as an author of their story, making decisions about the future, right? Those decisions are still going to be carried forward after they go through a transporter. And so I think that similar considerations apply here.
What is it? There's no soul. What is a soul?
Of course there's a soul.
So is a soul me as a horny 17-year-old? Is it me as a low T 80-year-old? Is it
It's all part.
Is it me after the stroke, before the stroke, with the brain damage? What does it mean? There's no soul.
You're so, I mean, really.
Think about it. How could there possibly be a soul?
How could there not be?
Well, what happens to your soul? I would say when you're under anesthesia.
It's still there.
So, but why am I not conscious of anything?
Well, I mean, having a soul doesn't mean that you have to be conscious.
The soul plays along, Dan.
Yeah.
Don't be snide.
All right. I don't think there's a soul, and I don't want to.
I do believe in souls.
Freezing me to think there's a soul.
I do actually believe in them. It's it's just.
Well, maybe Netcome's not the right company for you. There might
Nectome.
Okay, maybe there's another preservation company that you could go with.
But maybe I have an idiosyncratic version of it. Like I think that we don't know. Like if you're going to learn something about how a soul works, that's the job of science to discover. It's not the job of you to pretend like you know how it works, right? Like to the extent, like we need a word for how do people move around? How are they conscious? Like how do they dream, right? Like how do these things work? And if you want to say that there's obviously some sort of animating principle behind how people are able to function and call that a soul, that obviously exists. There's obviously something that when you're unconscious is different than when you are conscious, or when you're dead is different than when you're alive.
So animals have souls as well then.
It's perfectly reasonable to give that a name.
Well,
but having given it a name doesn't mean you know how its properties work, right? And it seems that one thing that's very clear is as you're damaged.
As I think, as me and Noam understand the term, is something that after you die lives on and allows you to experience things beyond death. That's sort of how I interpret the word soul.
I'm going to look up a word. Go ahead. Well, okay.
So in that regard, I would say that is something that, like, you should be able to do science about it, right? And it sure does seem that so like I think the basic impulse to have this concept of a soul makes a lot of sense, right? But I think if you want to learn what the properties of it are, that you'd be more effective figuring those properties out by empirically observing what happens with people rather than like asserting that you think that it's eternal and unmovable, right? Because in the case, especially of neurodegenerative diseases, right, you have people lose parts of themselves over time. So, you know, in what ways this interfacing with the soul, you know, it seems to me that maybe souls aren't indestructible, right? They seem to be very intimately tied with the brain. And as the brain is destroyed, then those parts of it are lost.
Well, but you're defining soul in such a way that it doesn't seem to be the more common way that people think about a soul. But
I have a very different way of thinking about it, I guess. But it's founded on what I can observe. It's founded on what I can see, right?
We're gonna wrap it up, Aurelia. I just want to tell you, I'm down. I mean, I just need to know that it's real.
Well, you have to be suffering from a terminal illness.
I will figure that out.
I will
get somebody to sign on the dotted line.
Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Suppose I said to you that you could do this. You could do this tomorrow. They'll preserve you, and you can roll the dice. Or you can, if you don't do it, you'll live out the rest of your life, but you can never do it.
Say it again.
I'll say it again.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like a now or never type of thing?
You can do this.
Now?
Yeah, it's everything. It's got to be done now. How about it's got to be done at 75? At 75, we'll do this procedure for you at 75. But if you don't take it at 75, you'll never get it. But you might live till 100. Who the hell knows?
I will decide at 75.
Well, you can't do that. You got to decide now. This offer won't last.
No, I can't. I can't do it now because I don't actually know if it's real. But if at 75, I'm convinced that this is like I really.
What about at 85?
I'll do it at 110.
But at 75, what level of assurance would you need that this might work? Obviously, you won't know at 75 that this works. I mean, unless by then the technology has been figured out, but I highly doubt that.
I don't know, but I do know this.
Would you roll with a 1 in 100 chance? You're 75. You're still in good health. It's a 1 in 100 chance that this will work.
It's like tomorrow.
No, these are good questions. Why don't you ask Aurelia
if she would do it?
It's her technology. It's even better.
Well, she probably thinks that the chances are much better than
right. But would you? At what age would you be ready to risk it all on your technology? Given that you understand the question. You're a scientist.
Man, so it's weird because if I get older, there's going to be a lot more evidence, right? But you're saying you have to decide right now, like what age you would have it done, and then ignore all evidence like between then and now. Is the idea here?
I think so.
You can answer it.
You can frame it how you want.
Yeah.
Man, that is.
I just want to know how confident you are in this tech.
So, sometimes it's like, why not just go for it, But I mean, because like if you really thought it'd be cool, then it's more a question of like, do you want to see the future now or later, right? And if you think that it definitely isn't going to work, then there's no point in doing it. You might as well just continue to live your life. And then like it's kind of complex because you're sort of weighing the rest of your life and you're weighing like whether it'll work or not. Really, this is why I want to do it for only terminally ill people, because at that point, right, you're going to die either way. The question is just, when you do die, do you want to be preserved? So I would feel pretty bad right now giving up like a large portion of my life to be preserved, because it's also sort of taking the choice away from me. Like, yeah, I think I'd be really annoyed at anybody saying like I have to do it at 75 or I have to do it at 65 or whenever, right? Like just on the principle of the thing, right? Because that's taking.
I mean, 75 is young. Look at Biden; he's spry as ever. But all right. I mean, at night we're all dying, right? We're all terminally ill in a certain sense. So, but at 90, whatever. I just want to live forever. And the awesome part is that is that as soon as you do it,
yeah, if it works
instantaneously, you're awake in the future.
But as far as living forever is concerned, you realize, Noam, that once you've lived 1 billionth to the 1 billionth power years, you're still not even close to the. I mean, like you'd go mad.
Would you? You know that
you lived.
You determined that
one with 1,000 zeros after it years, and then you raise that to the Google power, and you're just getting started.
Why would you go mad?
I don't know. I just think that. Do
you know how? I mean.
I just think
I get to see my kids get married.
Well, you see a lot more than that. I mean, obviously, no. Realistically, the universe isn't going to be around forever.
The Comedy Cellar will.
And at some point, the universe is. They don't even know if matter is eternal. There's some question as to whether matter itself, in some ridiculously far off future, will start to decay.
And what does it become?
It just becomes energy.
So I don't think you necessarily live forever, even if you are preserved and come back. And I'm not.
No, we're not saying your company's offering immortality, but Noam is saying he wants it.
Well, there's all kinds
I think we'll invent
new
ways to
have
die.
An accident, right? Yeah.
In the future, I think we'll invent new ways that aren't the package deal, because death has a bunch of stuff that comes together right now, and it doesn't all have to be that way. So like dying is both you don't have any agency over the future anymore, and it's all of your memories are destroyed and erased. And it is a cleaving of the social network, right? And these things can be done independent of each other. So I think that in the future, we'll have different ways to die that may very well be appealing, or maybe would be appealing to you, Noam. Like, so for example, if you permanently merge with another person, right? And then that entity goes forward and the two that formed it don't. Is that dying? Well, like in a sense, because the person, like the legal person that was you, isn't around there anymore. But on the other hand, your memories are still there. Your agency is not quite the same though, because this new entity behaves very differently. Some people may choose to like donate all of their memories to a common library, where they want to leave the future to younger people, but they also want their wisdom to have been remembered. There's lots of things, and I think we'll eventually kind of pick apart dying into its constituent parts, and some of them are appealing and some of them aren't. Some of them are ennobling to the spirit and some of them aren't. I think for most people, the way that death works doesn't work for them. And I hope we'll have more choices in the future about this.
All right, but just to review, you won't be married anymore, right?
Well, that's not for her.
That's gonna be up to the future to figure that out.
All right, we gotta go. You have another question, Dan? Or we gotta go.
Well, she also is doing work on preserving memories, Black Mirror style, right, on computers and things of that nature.
I'm doing the preservation now, and what it looks like to access those memories in the future. I have opinions on what that might be, but it's immaterial to whether the preservation works today. Okay. I'm the same as the people who preserved DNA in the 70s. Like, they knew that you could preserve DNA, and they started a thing called the San Diego Frozen Zoo, and they didn't know how that DNA would be read or what that technology would look like, but they didn't need to know that. They knew enough to know how to preserve it, and they knew that probably the people of the future would want it, and they were correct in that regard. So same thing, but for brains is what I'm doing.
If I were a single dude again, and I was in your profession, can you imagine how much, what you would get? Like, you meet a girl in a bar, what do you do? And then you can tell them this is what you do. It's like,
well, it's interesting.
There's nothing more. They wouldn't even. It's unbelievable.
I don't know that it's necessarily a chick magnet to be in that business, but
anything interesting.
And now, if it works, then you'd have I think that would be impressive. But
keep talking about not being married when you wake up, and you might be a single dude again soon.
Believe me, my wife. I mean, we can always renew our vows, right? There's no rule against that.
Is that you backpedaling?
I'm just saying, dancing one, billion zeros of marriage.
You can get up and have another wedding.
I mean, the same sexual position. It's just like, I get it. It's like, you know what? Maybe I don't want to live forever. Anyway, Aurelia, it's really nice to see you again. Are you going to go to another dialogue convention? Is that a regular thing of yours?
I think I probably will. I had a great time.
I had a good time too. I didn't think I was going to, but I actually really had a good time, and my wife did too. So I think maybe we'll go. But it's always in the same place.
I think they do it in different places.
I think they have them in Europe.
Yeah, they do.
Too, right? I want to go to the Europe one. Anyway, I had to get invited. I don't even know if I'll be invited back. Anyway, all right. Well, Aurelia, it's really nice to see you again. I don't know if you ever get to New York, but of course, if you do, you have my number. Just call me. We can hang out.
I would be delighted.
All right. Any last thing? That's it?
No, I would just, I think we started the discussion with how we'd like to die. I would like to be at ground zero of an atomic blast.
Oh my God, Dan.
Because then I feel like you're not really dead. You're just gone. You're vaporized. Anyway, that's a thought that I had.
Not your soul, though. Your soul's forever.
That's right.
My dad once said he wanted to be in his truck that he called Old Red and have it have rocket boosters on it and like rocket across a canyon and explode at the apex.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like, that's pretty cool.
It's like Thelma and Louise-ish.
But now he wants to be preserved. This is before I
well, is he just saying that because he wants to support your business?
Maybe. Your parents have got to use whatever your startup thing is. It's like, your parents have to use their startup thing. They have to.
Yeah, they have to.
They have to.
My parents bought my book, so.
Can I buy gift certificates? Oh, it doesn't matter. This like the second this is actually like considered legit, people are going to go crazy for this. Like people are going to go crazy for this. This is whatever. This is what's the who's the famous explorer, the Fountain of Youth?
Ponce de Leon.
Ponce de Leon. Yeah, that's what the company should have been called, Ponce de Leon. All right. Bye, Aurelia. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. A huge thanks to Sheath Underwear for sponsoring the show. And don't forget to head to sheathunderwear.com/seller and use code SELLER today to get 20% off your first order. Support the show and support your balls with Sheath.